Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by IRI Consultants. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit IRI at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Oraquah, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Now, it's been a little while since our last installment of the Best Practices in Employee Relations series. And today, I'm talking about positive employee relations not within a specific company, but within a specific industry, the transportation industry. So joining me today are Daren Wingard, Vice President of Associate Relations at CR England and Executive Director of NATERA, the North American Transportation Employee Relations Association, which is the only association completely dedicated to the fields of human resources and labor relations for the transportation industry. Also joining me today is Tammy Bartter, Senior Regional Human Resources Manager at Old Dominion and the current Vice Chair of the Board at NATERA, and Katharine Weber, Principal at Jackson Lewis PC and NATERA's Executive Secretary. Daren, Tammy, Katharine, thank you so much for joining me here today on Project HR.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Daren, one of the reasons we're focusing on the transportation industry right now is, let's face it, this is an industry that has been dealing with a lot of challenges, from supply chain issues to driver safety and retention. Let's talk a little bit about what the last couple of years have been like.
Yeah, well, it's been unprecedented, of course, for the industry. We've never really had to deal with all the things that we've dealt with in the last 2.5 years. If you look at the trucking industry overall, we have all had to figure out how to work from home. So anybody that could work from home was sent home. And fortunately, drivers in the industry, most drivers are alone. They're in their trucks. So they were relatively protected by just the nature of their job. Of course, we had to educate drivers on how to stay safe when they're outside the truck. And then you have a third category of employees, the people that work in shops. So maintenance shops in the industry around the country, they have to be there. It's hands on the truck, hands on the trailers. And I think as an industry, we've done a great job of taking care of those employees and helping them understand how to keep themselves safe. And it's been amazing to see how well the industry adapted to the last 2.5 years.
So, Tammy, how would you say these challenges have impacted employee relations within the industry?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I think with the labor shortage, that came real quick after COVID hit. I mean, it's all of these companies have really had to take a good look at their hiring processes and their training programs. To evaluate, where are we getting our employees from? How are we going to meet our hiring goals, to move the work? It's required more than ever a focus on building relationships with our employees. And that's through every step, through the interview process, hiring, training. People want to feel like they are part of a family and they are part of a team. It's not enough just to pay them anymore. And I think that is one of the things when we were talking about COVID, and we were learning a lot about each other through that time, and we had to be very careful with some of the conversations we had because it was hard to determine, what people's stance is on certain topics. So that building relationship, and it's all the more reason it's put a focus on our leadership teams being approachable and being willing to listen and act on employees' concerns and being there to share that communication and be that soundboard for them.
For sure. And so, Daren, when we talk about employee relations, and you and I have been friends for a number of years, so I know that you're immersed in the HR and labor relations communities as well. The transportation and logistics industry has unique concerns. So I want to talk a little bit about what's similar to other industries like manufacturing or retail and what's different.
I think what's similar for any employee relations strategy, no matter what type of employee, is just you got to listen. You have to listen to the people who are actually in the trenches doing the work. Doesn't matter what kind of employee they are.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, in the trucking industry, we have drivers, and that is definitely different. This is a group of employees who really they were attracted to truck driving, a lot of them, because they just want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
They
Sure.
want to be in the truck rolling down the road. So you have to figure out, how do you engage an employee who really just wants to be left alone to do their thing. So that can be a
Mm-hmm.
little tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine so. So, Catherine, I think a lot of people outside the industry kind of mistakenly believe that every truck driver is a Teamster. And we know that's not the case. But what's the current view of labor unions within the industry today?
Well, certainly I agree with you. I think most people do think that every truck driver is a member of the Teamsters, but nothing could really be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we find that overwhelmingly most of the companies in the transportation industry are not organized
Mm-hmm.
by and represented by a union. And certainly there are some folks in the industry who are represented by unions. And I think there's this there's a challenge for those folks who are represented by unions to try and see if they can't reestablish those relationships
Mm-hmm.
with folks when right now they have to go through and work with a union. And for the companies that are union free, those folks have to work even harder, especially over the course of the past 2 years, to connect with their employees and to make sure they're keeping their eye on the ball and to remain union free. Because,
Mm-hmm.
COVID has been such a huge distraction on
Yeah.
every front. And
Mm-hmm.
distraction is just like this gaping, open door for
Mm-hmm.
union organizers to walk through. So
Mm-hmm.
if you've got your eye off the ball when it comes to taking care of your people because you're busy trying to make sure that your business survives
Right.
COVID,
Right.
that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Darren, in a previous episode of Project HR, I had the privilege of talking with NATERA member Ellen Voy, who's president and CEO of the Women in Trucking Association. And she and I talked about gender equality in the workplace and the changing demographics within the transportation industry. Have those changing demographics impacted employee relations strategy?
Great question. And we love Ellen, and we love having her on our
Right.
board
Mm-hmm.
and everything that she's doing. We are
Absolutely.
seeing more and more women come into the industry every month as drivers. And I think it is causing a shift in employee relations strategy in the industry. The female drivers have a different perspective than their male counterparts. It's a different experience for them. One thing that I've seen across the industry with a number of different companies is a real effort to listen to the female drivers and really understand what it's like for them out there. And that could be as simple as talking to them one on one on the phone. But I've also seen in many cases ride alongs, which I think are a terrific tool. So you have managers who are in HR or employee relations, typically female managers who are getting in the truck with the women that drive for them and going out and actually being on the truck with them, so you can literally see out of the same windshield that they're
Mm-hmm.
seeing out of. And I think that is really, really important, to actually get out and see what's going on with the women that are coming into the industry.
Mm-hmm. And as a follow-up question, do you think that there's an impact here for the labor shortage? We talked about the challenges in the industry. As the changing attitudes around demographics and who might become a driver. What kind of impact do you think that's having?
Yes, I think that is having a little bit of an impact. We need more truck drivers for sure. And if we can get more women attracted to the profession and help them understand that it really can be a great career for them, just like it is for their male counterparts, I think that's something we really need to continue to focus on.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. When we return, I want to talk about how NATERA can help the transportation industry deliver positive employee relations. Stay with us.
In today's ever-evolving political and economic climate, the relationships you have with your employees can be the most critical to the success of your business, as well as the most vulnerable. At IRI Consultants, we understand the pressures your labor and employee relations teams are under, from changes at the NLRB to immigration issues, to controversial Supreme Court decisions, which makes it more important than ever for employers to stand up for their values and protect their businesses. With over 4 decades of experience in labor and employee relations, the IRI team brings a wide range of expertise. Our team includes published authors, CEOs, HR and communications professionals, former labor and employee relations executives, public relations experts, and even investigative journalists and award-winning podcasters. The IRI team will work with you every step of the way so that you can focus on running your business while we handle your trickiest labor and employee relations challenges. Get started today at iriconsultants.com. That's iriconsultants.com.
We're back here on Project HR with Daren Wingard, Tammy Bartter, and Katharine Weber. So, Tammy, what have you found to be the most important elements of a positive employee relations strategy, really for any transportation company?
Sure. I think in order to have that positive employee relations strategy, it really needs to start with leadership training for the management team. We need to make sure that our people in positions of leadership have the tools they need to be successful. They need to know how to build relationships with employees. And there really needs to be more of a formal, one-on-one process, whether that is once a week, bi-weekly, an opportunity for them to meet with each of their employees and find out what support do they need. Build that relationship, get to know them. Do we know where their heads are? Do we know what's going on in their life? Do they feel comfortable coming to us if they have issues and if they have concerns? That's driven by the management team and to drive that type of culture. We need members of management that can manage by walking around. They need to be on the floor talking to people when they're in their work area where they feel most comfortable. So I think that's really the biggest piece, is making sure that our people in positions of leadership are acting like leaders and are taking the time to build relationships with the people. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones doing the work. They're the ones on the frontline supervisor, and they're the ones communicating and driving a lot of the results that come from these companies.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what Daren was saying earlier about doing the ride-alongs and making sure that you're involved with your people, looking out the same windshield, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Katharine, with a decidedly pro-union administration today, what are you and Jackson Lewis advising transportation industry clients that they need to be aware of?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing right off the bat is to keep in mind that President Joe Biden has promised that he would be the most union-friendly president of all time. And I think yes, and he's really going to do everything he can. And I think we're starting to see that he will, in fact, carry forward and deliver on that promise, right? I mean, we've seen Jennifer Abruzzo, right? We've seen her action, at the board level. And I think that, you are going to see this just incredibly aggressive board. You're going to see collaboration between the different agencies. We recently just saw that the board reached agreements with the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice's antitrust division so that they could collaborate on enforcement of labor and antitrust laws. And I think the combination, of those promises and that desire to succeed and show momentum as we head into the midterms and as we approach the next election, I think that that's a huge, issue for employers in our industry, in every industry, quite frankly, to keep their eye on.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you said about the collaborative work between agencies that we really have to pay attention to at this point.
Absolutely.
So, Daren, in transportation and logistics, as an industry that employs a whole host of professionals working in different environments with wildly different job responsibilities, have you seen companies where one positive employee relations strategy works for the entire organization? Or is it better where you've got different strategies based on job classification?
In my experience, I think you have to have different strategies based on the type of employee. If you think about most big trucking companies, for example, they have huge IT departments,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great example. So here's an employee that is staring at a screen all day,
Mm-hmm.
and you can take a very high tech approach to interacting, engaging, and listening to that kind of employee. But on the other hand, at trucking companies, you have the mechanics who are out in the shops. That's actually makes it really easy because you can have an in-person experience with them because you know where they're going to be. And then you have the drivers, which is the ultimate remote workforce. And in my experience, you have to have a low tech approach with those drivers. You have to meet them where they are.
Hmm.
And usually, I think that looks just like a conference call, just a simple conference call that can be used to listen to the drivers.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. So, Tammy, I wanted to ask you how much of delivering positive employee relations is connecting with employees? You talked about, making sure that you had accessible and engaged leaders. You know, having a strong organizational culture is a difficult thing to do when you've got sort of long distance employees, like Daren said, that want to be left alone to do their job. How does Old Dominion make those connections with a mostly mobile workforce?
Yeah, I think, and I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is, it has to be planned. Obviously, technology is a wonderful thing. I mean, all of our drivers do have handheld devices that they have
Hmm.
with them at all times. So we communicate on those throughout the day. We recently implemented about a year ago a new HRIS system. So we have a lot of communications that are on that HRIS system that we can use to communicate with our drivers and keep them on in the loop, keep them in on things. But I'll tell you another thing. Our drivers, even though they are out on the road, they are in service centers. So they may be driving from Ohio to California, but they may be stopping in a couple service centers on the way. And we talk a lot about being easy to do business with. It's not just for our external customers, it's for our internal customers.
Hmm.
So, regardless of what's any service center or driver is going into, they should be greeted. They should feel welcome.
Hmm.
They should feel like anyone they go to is approachable and is going to handle any questions or concerns. And a lot of it is just being accessible, being
Hmm.
available, being accessible
Hmm.
24 hours a day whenever they're needed. And that's really what we strive for.
So, of course, you're all part of the leadership team at NATERA, the North American Transportation Employee Relations Association. I want to dig into a little bit about how NATERA supports member companies with their own positive employee relations.
Sure. Well, I'll take a stab at that.
Okay.
I think, we have an annual conference every year that is just fantastic. And we have people like Ellen Voy, right?
Hmm.
She
Hmm.
comes in and she addresses the group and she talks about the different things that women in trucking is working with their members on, and she opens the door, really kind of throws a little light on some possibly creative solutions for the age-old driver
Hmm.
problem that we all sit in the room and complain about and can't figure out how to fix, right?
Right.
We, have other really wonderful speakers, and sometimes, you will find some of the most creative ideas. We look for them inside the industry, certainly, but we also look outside the industry for other companies who have done a phenomenal job in terms of creating employee culture where everybody feels supported, where everybody feels like, the manager is there to say, hi, how can I help you? As opposed to, what have you done for me today? Or what haven't you done for me today? So I think, we look to provide our members with not only great advice from people inside the industry, but also people outside the industry when it comes to creating positive employee relations. We also help them with, making sure they've got their eye on the ball with respect to their legal issues. It's funny, Daren was talking about our first conference, or not our first conference, but our conference in 2020. And that was just as COVID was about to hit everybody's radar. And I can recall, I was there, and we had been following in our firm COVID since, I guess, early January, and making plans for what we would have to face with our clients and the different possible solutions and issues they would need to have on their radar screen. And, so before anyone else in the industry was talking about COVID and how it was going to affect their drivers and their other employees, we were actually saying to our folks, hey, here's the forecast, here's what's coming, here are our suggestions, here are the laws that you need to keep on your radar, here's what you know that you can't do right now, but as things progress, here's where we see this going. And then in 2021, in the fall of 2021, I think we were one of the first industry conferences to open back up to an in-person and all in-person annual conference to folks. So we've really been on that leading edge, especially when it comes to COVID, with helping people forecast and prepare, and then trying to get everything back into balance and everybody refocused on all the things that make them successful companies. But in addition to our annual conferences, we also have webinars that we hold multiple times a year on whatever the timely topic might be. And we also have monthly group sessions where we talk about specific issues that our industry is confronting. And we just have this great group of folks who are, if you come to a NATERA conference and you come up to one of our board members, to the extent that they don't come to you first, right? And they say, hey, I'd really like to get a chance to talk to Daren Wingard. I've seen that he's been so successful in doing this, that, or the other thing, or I want to talk to somebody from Old Dominion. We will make sure that within the next 15 minutes, you get the opportunity to meet that person and to talk to them and start forming relationships with other people in the industry so that they can be your safety net, right? They can be the help and that kind of guidance and counsel to help you and your company succeed.
And I think that collaborative nature of what NATERA is and does is just, that's the most valuable part there. It's time for another quick break. We're going to be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Orqua, and my guests today are Daren Wingard, Tammy Bartter, and Katharine Weber. We are back. So, Daren, tell me a little bit more about NATERA's mission and membership.
Our mission is to support our members and conference attendees to help them be even better at their jobs and put them in a position to make their companies even more effective and successful. We do that by getting them information, ideas, and connections as part of our annual conferences and other events that we host throughout the year.
So, of course, IRI has been part of NATERA's annual conference in the past, and the 2023 conference is coming up here in February. Talk a little bit about that event. Where can we find more information?
You can go to our website, which is www.natera, that's spelled NATERA.org. As we finalize our plans for next year's conference, we will keep the website updated. It's going to be at the very end of February next year, February 26th through 28th. We will be in Tampa, Florida. And the three of us that are on this podcast, plus more people, are part of a committee, and we are finalizing our plans. So watch that space. The other thing that you can do to stay up on any NATERA announcements or events is to follow us on LinkedIn. And to find us on LinkedIn, you actually have to type in the full name. So type in North American Transportation Employee Relations Association, and that will get you to our LinkedIn page.
Perfect. And we'll include all of that in our episode companion so that people will have direct links to that if they download that episode companion. So NATERA offers both individual and corporate memberships. How do we know which is best?
If you work for a large company and you have a large HR department, a lot of people working in employee relations, and you think you're going to send 4 or more people to our conference, then the corporate membership is definitely the way to go. It saves companies a lot of money. You're able to send an unlimited number of people to our conferences at an extremely discounted rate and have an unlimited number of members under your corporate membership who can all participate in our members only events that happen throughout the year. If you work at a smaller company, or if you're an army of one like I am, then the individual membership is the better choice. And it still gives you access to our conference pricing on the early bird pricing, which can save you a lot of money. And if you miss that, it's still not that much.
And I wanted to mention the recent collaboration that we did with NATERA, the 2022 Labor Activity and Transportation Report. How can this report help us with our positive employee relations strategies?
It can help you a lot. This report is amazing. If you haven't read it yet, you owe it to yourself to check it out. It's absolutely crucial for those of us that work in employee relations to understand what the trends are in the industry in terms of labor activity. There are also really great articles that some of our board members have contributed to the 2022 Labor Activity in Transportation Report. And we don't have enough time to talk about it here.
Right.
It is extremely thorough and an absolute must for people to read that. So I cannot recommend it highly enough.
And just as a reminder, a link to the NATERA website, the 2022 Labor Activity and Transportation Report, NATERA's LinkedIn, all of that will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are questions that I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. So our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about best practices in employee relations within the transportation industry. So in your opinion, and this question is for all of you, when it comes to employee relations, which is more valuable for leaders to employ, collaboration or communication?
Well, I'm going to jump in first so nobody takes my idea.
Perfect.
It's like peanut butter and jelly, right? I mean, how can you have a great peanut butter and jelly sandwich without both of the key elements? You need collaboration and you need communication. And I will say, if I have to choose one, communication done correctly includes collaboration, right? It's just really hard to do it right.
Yeah, right.
Great answer.
Daren, Tammy?
I can't top that.
All right. I lean with Katharine on that one. I think it starts with communication, but then it leads to collaboration. And then at the end of it, they really need to both come together for them to truly, work and be a success.
Excellent. Next question is, what is the best book that you've read recently?
I'll jump in on that one. I've got a great book to recommend to everybody. It's called The Culture Code, and it's by Daniel Coyle.
That's a great one.
Fantastic book, really fun to read, and a lot of great lessons and great takeaways in that book for those of us who work in employee relations.
Very nice.
I would jump in, and I don't know if this is a book, when I listen to a lot of audiobooks, I travel quite a bit, but one of the ones I listened to recently, it's called Dolly Parton's Song Teller. And it just, she talks about her history and her life, and I think it's just interesting to hear from where she came from, and just the goals and the aspirations she had, and, to just be what she is now.
Very nice. Katharine?
I'm going to be the boring attorney, okay? For the past 2.5 years, who has time to read anything? If you're in my shoes, so I'm a double agent, right? I also help lead our firm's disability leave and health management practices. So that means I am on the forefront of all things COVID. So the CDC guidance, does that count? The guidance is up to over 500 pages now. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, I think that counts. That's quite a hefty read. All right, next question. What is your favorite thing about the work that you do? And Katharine, I'll let you go first on that one.
What I really enjoy doing is sitting down with an employer and trying to help them identify their problem. I mean, most of the time they mistake a symptom for the problem, right? So it's like, what's the real problem? And then identify what the contributing factors are that are causing the problem. And then sit down, and it's almost like a whiteboard experience, right? I mean, you creatively work to identify solutions that will help you solve the problem and come up with a better way of doing business. And I just love that.
Yeah, for sure. Daren, what's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
It's helping our drivers, seeing the success stories. I mean, I know drivers who didn't even graduate from high school who are now making nearly $100,000 per year. They bought a house, they bought their wives out of their jobs so they can stay at home and take care of their kids. And in some cases, they've sent their kids to college, and those kids are the first generation of that family to ever go to college. And
Nice.
when I see success stories like that and the pride that the drivers show in what they're doing, it is really inspiring.
Yeah, love that. Tammy, what about you?
You know, I think for me, my favorite thing about working in HR is you can be creative. When you work in HR, there's not just one way to accomplish something or one way to address an issue. And it can be a lot of fun to sit there and just brainstorm and come up with all of the different ways that you can come up with addressing an issue. So you know, not every day is a sunshine rainbow day, but you do get some of those in the mix.
Yeah,
and you can be thinking about that.
All right, so Tammy, let's just keep going. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
As a new supervisor many years ago, one of my managers told me, don't be scared to speak up if you think something needs to be changed. He said, you know, there's a lot of people, once you go into a leadership position, if you're not gonna try to make a change, you're not really doing anything but going with the flow. So, and you know, he said, don't sit there, just speak up if you think there's a better way of doing something.
Good advice. Daren, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
I think it's that you never really know what's going on with another person unless you take the time to find out. So I try to keep that in mind as I do my job and as I go through the world. And that was a great piece of advice.
Yeah, for sure. Katharine, what about you?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever received was that sometimes you have to slow down to get ahead. And even though that's counterintuitive, it's really true in so many aspects of our lives and, you know, in our careers, right? I mean, if you just go racing off and plunge down a path because everybody else is doing it, lots of times you're going to find out that at the end of the path, you're at a dead end. You got to turn around and come back, right? So you really do have to sometimes, you know, stop, take a breath, think critically about everything that you're reading, everything that you're seeing, you know, why people are doing the things that they're doing, and then make a decision and move forward.
Very good. Last question, Daren, who or what inspires you?
Again, I have to say our drivers, whether it's at CR England where I work or just in the industry in general, they work incredibly hard. Anytime I don't want to do something, or if I think that something is going to be really difficult, I think about our drivers and what they do each and every day, and then I laugh at myself and I just get on with it.
Very good. Very good. Katharine, who or what inspires you?
You know, I would have to say that it's really been, you know, a wonderful thing coming out of COVID. And I did say coming out of COVID because we are, you know, but just
Yes.
being able to actually experience and see the resiliency and the creativity that we're all capable of, you know, when we're pressed. And that goes for business leaders, community leaders, and even the people that you work with day in and day out. It's really incredible if you stop and think about it.
Yes, very nice. Agree. So Tammy, last question. Who or what inspires you?
Sure. I'm going to go with the who. You know, my dad inspires me. He's the reason I work in this industry. My dad's managed warehouses since he was 17. He encouraged me to get a warehouse job right after high school to work my way through college. And I remember my first day, I walked into a warehouse. I was 19. There were 300 employees in there, and I was one of 3 women. working in the building. I have never been so intimidated, nervous, and scared. And, I went home and I was like, God, I don't know if I can do this. And he said, it's pretty simple. There's only one thing you have to do. You just have to work harder than any of them. He said, that's all you really need to do. Just go in there with the mindset every day, you're going to work the hardest.
Yeah.
And he was right, because once they saw I wasn't going away, it all worked out just fine. So, but it would be my dad.
All right. Very nice. I want to thank all three of you for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I also want to thank those listening in. Don't forget that we took great notes on this episode for you. You can grab those notes for free at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you're ready for your Project HR debut, our team is always looking for outstanding guests. Let us know about your expertise at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Project HR. A new episode posts every Thursday. Finally, drop me a line, leave us a review, or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this week's episode of Project HR. Let's make it a great day at work.